My name is Matt Webb with UT Extension Marshall County, and we have a presenter today that has I think, a fascinating topic. I've seen it on a video from out of Georgia, and she's got some other things she's going to share with us today. But we have Dr. Renata Oakes. She is with Forest Systems here with the University of Tennessee. She is stationed at the Middle Tennessee Ag Research and Education Center in Spring Hill. So, Dr. Renata, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you do what you need to do, but I do appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely good to keep interacting any way, shape, or form we can, right? So I will be sharing my screen to show the presentation here. So let me move things around. Just give me 1 second. Let me see. Okay. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, not yet. All right.
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, thanks for having me, Matt, and for the invitation to be part of this presentation series. And I wanted to share a little bit about this project that we have going on right now. We had recently started, so I have mostly preliminary data, not the whole project has not been completed. So there will be more presentations on the topic to come, and hopefully we are hoping to have an in-person field day in the fall if we can, so that everyone can see firsthand. But this is just to explain a little bit about the idea of the project. So yeah, the title is the corn grain silage production under the living mulch systems, and as you've mentioned, this is in collaboration with the University of Georgia. They have been studying the living mulch systems into corn, especially corn grain, for quite some time, about 10 years now. And they asked us to collaborate with them to look at some other additions to the system, including corn silage, and also including some grazing into the system. And this is a topic that I'm very interested and passionate about. So yeah, just a little background on the corn production in Tennessee. As we probably all know, that for production of silage has quickly declined for the past 20 years. We have almost half of what we used to produce in the past, and I would attribute most of this reduction due to the almost disappearance of dairies that we have in a state that was dedicated. The silage production was mostly dedicated to the dairies, and now we don't have as much. So, but on the other hand, as you can see at the bottom, we have nearly doubled the production of grain corn in the state in the last 20 years. So that is definitely something that we have been producing more and more, and trying to make this system, this corn production in general, more efficient is definitely beneficial to the state. So a little bit about living mulch. I don't know, many people don't really know the definition of living mulch. So basically, we all understand that when we plant most of these crops, we have usually cover crops. But the main difference between cover crops and living mulch is that we do not terminate the living mulch, so they coexist with the cropping that we are producing. So it's basically an extension of these cover crops. Many times there's a suppression of forage if necessary to minimize the competition, and then we can use as living mulch either warm season or cool season forages, and there's different possibilities that we can evaluate. But in this project, we have two different mixtures of living mulch that we'll be evaluating. So in the past, there has been some living mulch studies, especially in the northern areas and colder regions, and it was concluded that there was a high sensitivity to frost, and there was a delayed corn emergence in development. So it wasn't as successful. You know, this study out of Canada wasn't as promising. But in Georgia, the living mulch systems have been a very good strategy. So one of the conclusions that they have is that it has potential in these warmer regions and with warmer soils. So we do have that in our advantage, and that was concluded in Georgia. So and there's a lot of benefits of the system. So first, it will, you know, increase soil organic matter, soil aggregation, decrease erosion. Many of these things, you know, a normal cover crop system will already provide, but the living mulch set has some additional benefits. One of them being the suppression of weeds. So it naturally will suppress weeds. They're trying to grow with corn. And as you can see in this picture, you know, we have basically a very thick stand of white clover, and you pretty much can't see any weeds growing with it. So we have corn, and the clover is so aggressive that it does not allow anything else to grow. And of course, in this system, we were using legumes, and we have the advantage of the nitrogen transfer. So one of the added benefits is also the possibility of having to apply way less nitrogen to the corn, and that can definitely be an economical potential of the system as well. So there was a study in 2016 that we concluded that living mulch systems could decrease soil loss by 77% and phosphorus and nitrogen loss by 80%. So that is definitely a great benefit of this system as well. And so specifically to the project that we have going on here in Spring Hill. So this is a funded project with University of Georgia collaborating with us, and it's funded by CIG and RCS-CIG. And we have our location here in Tennessee, and also 3 locations in Georgia, where the research we have been conducting here in Georgia is mostly demonstrations on farm. And this is just, you know, the calendar of the project. So we had the forage was established. So all I will be showing was established in 2018, October 2018. And then we had corn planting last year in May. And then we harvested from August through September, depending if it was grain or silage. And it was our plan to have fall grazing shortly after corn was harvested. So the idea was to have grazing for 28 days, where the animal was going to be eating the remaining living mulch and also the residue of the corn, especially for grain. But you'll see that last year was a little bit of a gamble, so we weren't able to do that, and I'll explain exactly why. So that is why last year we are considering to be our preliminary data year, because there was a lot of uncertainty, especially weather-wise. And this year is our official first year of data. So that's one of the reasons I don't have a whole lot of data to show, but we'll get there. So for our study here, we are utilizing a mixture of crimson clover and cereal rye. And we had planted 10 pounds per acre of the crimson clover with 20 pounds per acre of cereal rye. And that is one of our treatments. And we also have as a separate treatment just white clover at 10 pounds per acre. In both of these mixtures, either the white clover or the crimson rye, they were planted as a living mulch for corn grain or corn silage. So we have a total of 4 treatments. and we had applied nitrogen. So for the crimson clover cereal rye mixture, we have about 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And usually for the control, we apply usually about 140 pounds of nitrogen per acre, but we only applied the initial rate because we are expecting that crimson clover will provide some of that nitrogen that's necessary. And for the white clover, since it's the only species being a legume, we only applied 40 pounds per acre. And before anybody asks, why the difference? And you will see that this has some effects on the development of corn. But the main reason why that difference in the amount of nitrogen that was applied is first because, white clover is going to provide a little more nitrogen than the mixture, assuming that cereal rye is also going to be consuming some of that nitrogen. And also, you gotta understand that white clover is a very short, aggressive crop that it will be easily overshaded by corn. So if we applied too much nitrogen, that would have compromised the stand of white clover, especially for the following seasons. So that is one of the reasons why there was that difference. And this has been studied in Georgia previously, where they tested different rates, and 40 pounds were the one that, yes, you're going to see a little bit of corn production being affected, but you will definitely maintain the stand of white clover for longer. So it's a little bit of give that we have to have. So for our specific objective here, we will be looking at the yield of corn grain, and silage in these different systems. Also, we are interested in the living mulch mass and the nutritive value of this living mulch to be used as a forage, since one of our goals is to graze in the fall and potentially in the spring as well. So we are trying to utilize that area as long as we can and as much as we can as well. So hopefully we can have 2 months of grazing that is being provided besides all the benefits the living mulch systems already brings to the producer. And of course, economical viability and production being sustained by the system. And we also be looking at some soil characteristics. This is not, we have another researcher, Dr. Sindhu Jagadama. She's the one that is responsible for the soil aspect, and she'll be investigating that. This is part of the project, but not part of specifically my part of the project, but we are also going to be evaluating the soil. So here is what we have used last year. So we looked at silage is the variety we use, is 120 maturity and a grain for 108. Our goal using the different maturities just so we could have harvesting be as close as we can for both. So we know that silage will be maturing a little earlier. So we wanted to get them harvested as close as we can. And it was about 2 weeks from one another, but that's why the difference in the maturity. And here's just a graph of how the plots are. We have a set of small plots where we also have a control. And in green, we have our paddocks. So there are 3 acre paddocks. And we only had 12, and we have 4 replications of each. So we were not able to have a control in the paddocks, but also we wouldn't be having grazing in those paddocks. So we decided to have a set of small plots also to include a control in the same environment, so we can actually compare how much corn is growing and producing in this area for Tennessee with the same conditions, and being able to compare that with the system. So this is some data from last year. So in regarding corn production and for grain, this is the crimson rye mixture. So we had about 120 bushels per acre. And I can say that it was very comparable to our standard corn production, so our control. And for the white clover, it was definitely lower. We had about 40 bushels per acre, which it was definitely lower. But one of the things that we are interested is not only the grain production, but also the benefits of the system and the grazing that can come from it and the economical viability. Maybe you produce a little less, but it will still be economical viable. And we will be having a full economical analysis of the project as well. And keep in mind that for the crimson rye, even though it produced quite the same amount as our control, we applied quite a lot less nitrogen. So it was about 80 pounds per acre, which is pretty remarkable. And as far as silage goes, we didn't have a whole lot of difference. It was still significantly different, but we had about 15 tons per acre for the crimson rye living mulch, and about 8 tons per acre for the white clover, which again was also lower, but it was, considering we only applied 40 pounds per acre of nitrogen, that's also pretty exciting results. And as I've mentioned, part of the objective is to look at the living mulch potential as a forage. So we were monitoring the forage throughout the whole, even before corn was planted, all the way through harvesting. We were looking weekly, we were taking measurements of mass and analyzing forage quality. We don't have that data analyzed yet, but we did monitor the forage to look at the potential as that it would have for grades in the future. And that was monitored weekly. So about 16 weeks we were monitoring the production of the forage. And regarding soil characteristics, this is just some benefits that other similar projects have looked at, and one of them was soil erosion and nutrient runoff in the corn silage production with cured clover. We also there was other studies looking at water use efficiency in the living mulch and cover crop corn production. And the white clover living mulch also was known to reduce the need for phosphorus fertilizer application to corn, as I mentioned it earlier in the presentation as well. So there's a lot of potential regarding the soil quality and soil characteristics in general. So the second objective of this project is to look at grazing. We will be looking at forage botanical composition to exactly have a pretty big picture of what exactly the animal is consuming. If we do have some weed suppression, depending on the living mulch that we have been using. Also looking at soil characteristics after harvesting and after grazing, during grazing. So we'll be looking at all of that. And initially, like I've mentioned last year, so we established the forage, we planted corn, and we had harvest of the silage in August. Grain was in September. And as you probably remember, last year our fall was dramatically dry, and that definitely affected the system, which we pretty much didn't have anything to be grazed. So that was definitely, and we were afraid, even though we still had a little bit of clover, we were afraid that if we compromise that stand, the sward even more, we would compromise the regrowth for the next season. So we decided to not have fall grazing last year. because first of all, we probably wouldn't have been able to go all the 28 days. It was just very compromised at that point. And that's when we decided to just make a few adjustments to the project, where we decided to actually have spring grazing in addition to fall grazing. So for this year, you will see we actually just concluded the spring grazing. We pulled the animals out of these pastures, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So they were in the pastures for pretty much the whole month of April. And it was promising, and I think it actually would be even better to being able to have 2 months of grazing out of the project, because the before corn is established, the forages are growing. They're mostly cool season forages, so they are going full speed. And as I will share some pictures, you'll see that we had some problems with weed infestation after that the fall drought, because it was a little difficult for all those forests to recover, especially white clover. And we were under the assumption that the spring grazing would also help, to give the white clover a little extra strength to fight off those weeds and grow back. And we are seeing that, even though there are some weeds, unfortunately, white clover came back and is fighting, and it is very, very, there's definitely a potential there. So, so as I already anticipated, this is how it looked in the spring, in the fall last year. So there was not a whole lot to be grazed, and this is the silage plots. There was definitely not a whole lot there, and we decided that it would just compromise the sort even more. So we opted for the spring grazing. And here's just some graphs of how our precipitation looked last year. And September was 0, so that was exactly when we were harvesting our grain, and it was definitely unfortunate, and that it happened. So we're definitely looking at real case scenario here. So for the botanical composition, we'll be collecting, the quadrats, 10 samples per paddocks, and looking at what exactly is those forages are composed of. Especially, it will be very important for this year, since we had a lot of rain infestation. So it will be important to know exactly what was available to the animals, what will be available in the fall, and also throughout the corn season, how much is the white clover being able to sustain production. So it will be very interesting to look at the composition of the sward. And we will be, like I mentioned, looking at a full economical advantage of the system. So we are hopeful that it can bring some pretty good data for the Tennessee producers, as it has for Georgia. And even though we had those problems with drought and all of those things, is real life, and that will happen, and we are trying to figure out ways to fight those if that happens. So we actually are not as unhappy that happened, because we can find ways to fix the problem as we are facing it. So just I will share some of the pictures that we have been taking up to this point now. So we are almost getting ready to plant corn again. We are a little bit late, but the system delays things a little bit, as if it was a standard production. So it's a little bit behind, but it's to be expected. And so here, like I mentioned, we have a whole lot of weeds, and this was for mid-February. So in February, we were concerned. We could barely find white clover, and it was a little concerning. but I can anticipate that we are not concerned anymore. But we still had to keep pushing. And this was pre-grazing, so that was a little before. It was in the first week of April. So our cereal, if you can see the first picture on top here, you can see there was our cereal crimson mixture, and it was doing pretty well. And white clover was starting to come back, but we were really hopeful that having grazing in those plots was going to help, the regrowth and white clover to fight off. And during grazing, we were able to have about, I think it was, depending, we did a put and take methodology. So we had on average about 1 through to 4 cows, depending. This is with the dairy cows that we are using. So we had between 1 and 4, depending on the paddock. And this is our post-grazing picture. So as you can see, it did work. The grazing definitely helped. Here for the cereal rye crimson clover, you can see that crimson was still around, and it looked pretty good, and almost no weeds, as you can note. And for the white clover, it came back, and we do have a few weeds in the stand, but underneath is mostly white clover again, and we are very happy with these results. And the cows actually gained a little bit of weight just by grazing those in 28 days. So they gained, and it was promising. So we're very.
Renata, this is Kevin Rose. Sorry to interrupt. When were these pictures taken right here?
This one was about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's where we are right now, just getting ready for planting. So we are collaborating with Dr. Nick Hill. He brings his sprayer from Georgia that he kind of designed, and we are getting ready to spray, because the way we do it, we spray just the rows where we are going to be planting corn, and that's how we established the system, and we are pretty much getting ready to do that within the next couple weeks. And this is just, one of the things, a take-home message, I guess, that the living mulch must be viewed as a holistic system that is considering sustainability rather than treating each as an independent component. So this is important to note. Like I mentioned, we will have a little bit lower corn production, but we are interested in looking at the whole system. What does that bring to the soil? Can we use more of that land, for grazing? Or so is the more economical, even though it will produce a little less, but we will spend a lot less too. So those are the importance of the system, that it does have a lot of potential, especially if you're looking at to being more sustainable and environmental friendly, and looking at corn in a different way. So with that, this is a picture from last year, and that's how amazing it was. And we're hopeful that we will get pretty close again this year. Again, as you can see, it did suppress quite a lot of the weeds, but the drought really affected us tremendously. So yeah, I apologize, I don't have more data to show, but this is a project that will be ongoing for the next couple of years, and I would be happy to share, our results as we gather. So, and I would take any questions that you might have, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much.
So, Renata, this is Kevin. Obviously, you didn't do any kind of weed control at all in this system.
No, we did not.
So we're looking at some horseweed or some kind of escapes up there, maybe?
Yeah, there was a few. But, in the past, right before we we established the system, we had it was a crabgrass pasture for the dairy. I don't know if you probably remember. And we had a lot of problems, with weeds, and there was pigweed and all that fun stuff there. And that, you know, we were especially worried that crabgrass would be a problem because it was there before, and that didn't happen. We did have a little bit of crabgrass in the crimson cereal rye mixture, but not in the white clover. So it definitely showed a little bit of promise there. But I don't know how this year is a different story. So I'm curious to see how we'll have after corn is growing. You know.
Well, I have a producer that's really, he was a dairy producer that's now raising cattle. He's got a system. He's looking at doing some grazing behind his corn, and this may be something that would really work. He harvests silage corn and grain corn.
Okay.
He's
Yeah.
kind of look. I know Angela McClure and I went down to his place last year, and he was looking at trying to sow something, maybe get some ryegrass or something in there real early when the
Yeah.
corn got so tall, so that he would have something maybe in the fall. But a system like this might work for him. The advantage he would have is this is under irrigation.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So if you could control the moisture, then you wouldn't eliminate that fall drought, and you would probably have this.
Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt. Yeah. Even, you know, like I mentioned, you know, let me go back a couple pictures here. This picture on the top on the right hand corner, you know, is promising on how much it came back as compared to a couple months ago, you know, in February, we didn't have any. So this is, you know, with no control, nothing, no water after a drought. So a white clover is really resilient. It just cannot go with any water. But yeah, if he has an irrigated system, I have no doubt that it would definitely work. And you know, and the cows love it. We gave them some of the bloat guard to, you know, kind of prevent bloating. That is a concern. But other than that, you know, they'll eat it, and they're in clover will keep coming back. So.
Well, the one concern I'd have on the crimson, you mentioned the crabgrass pressure. The crimson and the rye, the cereal rye is going to probably play out where the white clover won't as much. So I would anticipate less grazing being available in the fall with that system, just because of it's going to play out. So I could see where maybe your crabgrass might be a problem.
Yeah, unless, you know, because that's true. Last fall, if we were to have grazing, it would definitely not have been rye and crimson. It would have been crabgrass. So yeah, I guess I'm not as concerned with crabgrass because crabgrass we know is still pretty good to graze. But yeah, definitely. I mean, we're definitely comparing. They're different species, different mixtures, you know. But the white clover, it has a promise to stay, you know, longer. And if you're looking at grazing in the fall too, because, you know, in the spring, you know, both did quite well, but white clover definitely has the potential to be viable throughout, you know, pretty much from, I don't know, March through October, you know.
Is there any thoughts of any other clover or anything else that you might use? I mean, or is it just these two options?
We haven't. I mean, one of the things that I, you know, talked to Dr. Nick Hill, and I was curious with any other species. I don't know what alfalfa work, and from what he has, because he had looked at different species in the past, and he didn't have as much luck as he does with clover, with white clover. But I don't know. I mean, I am curious to see would red clover be a potential, even though you would have to, you know, kind of reestablish after a couple of years, 3 years. But I feel that red clover is drought resistant, and could it be better if we keep having that drought? You know, I don't know. But it's definitely something that piqued my interest, and I'm curious about red clover, to be honest. We have to compare economically. Would that be, even though we'll have to keep sowing, you know, back, but if you wouldn't be as affected by the drought, it might be an option, you know.
Well, this is a great job and a great demonstration. I'm looking forward to seeing your data
Yep.
as we get on into this. And something that we might even can look at less is not on here, but when you start looking at the economic side of things, is this a potential for some of these guys, if they don't want to fool with wheat or something, maybe looking at sowing this and maybe even leasing some ground for some fall grazing where they can bring cattle in and after, say, their corn's gone or whatever. And, there may be some thoughts there, some ways that these row crop guys might look at some additional income if that might be feasible. I don't know.
Yep.
Amanda's on here. Amanda, this might be a great topic for some of our row crop meetings next time we do it, to just let these guys see this and let them think and see if there's any ways they might be able to incorporate this into their operation.
I agree, Kevin, looking at the row crop side of things.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean,
I tell you, Renata, when you get this in play this year, I've got a guy I'd like to bring up there if he's willing to come take a look at it.
Yeah.
He may want to pick your brain because he's trying to do this right here.
okay.
And
Yeah, for
this
sure.
may- and the thing is, I know Joe David mentioned you haven't had that special sprayer out of Georgia, but
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Joe David about it, and I mean, we can do it without the special spray. I know that's Dr. Hill is very proud of his design, and yeah, he's definitely very helpful. But as I talked to Joe David, I mean, I think we can make it work without it.
well, there's a lot of these old cotton guys that's going out of business. There may be some hooded sprayers around here,
True.
some options that a guy like that could find, because that's all you really need is a hooded
Exactly,
sprayer
yeah,
to go
yeah.
down there.
Yeah, that's all you need. Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Well, good job. I won't dominate the conversation anymore, but thank you for great information. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, thanks for having me, and I'll be, glad to give more of these talks, and especially like I said, now all I've been doing is work from home, so I miss some interaction, even if it's online.
I have a comment/question here. I read some of the work that Dr. Hill and some of them down in Georgia. And that first year is really tough on corn yields, especially when you use very little nitrogen. But like that, over time, that overbuilds up organic matter and starts to store some nitrogen in the soil. That's when the yields start getting a little better.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think that may get better as long as that clover stays good.
Right. And that's what we're hoping. I think that once again, this is like why I consider it to be our first real year, because before it's almost like establishment, and now is where we're going to see how the system, can survive throughout this period. So I agree.
And then a couple of questions that I had is what is your row spacing that you're using in your planter for your corn? And then have y'all thought of using any herbicide that's specific for use in clover that maybe offsets some of these weed issues?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we haven't thought about herbicides, is that something that I was talking to Joe David, and we were kind of picking our brain and see, would there be something that we could do, but we haven't. We are trying to see how it plays out this way, and I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely something that I would be interested if we could control, especially after a drought or something like that, to make it, a little easier. But yeah, I don't know. And as row spacing, I need to double check that. I know that we had to do, it was larger than usual because otherwise, the shading would have been a problem too. But I will double check that and I can send that to you. I don't remember the top of my head, but I know it was not the standard that we use here.
Thank you. Good job.
Yeah.
The one thing that would be interesting, we don't have the pigweed pressure. We're getting it that they've got in West Tennessee. Sure would be nice to see this put in an area where they did have some pigweed pressure just to see what happens.
Yeah.
That's probably needed.
Yeah, for sure. You know, just by judging for what we had when we had crabgrass the year before, there was quite a lot of pigweed. I'm assuming not as much as, you know, you're saying in West Tennessee, but we did have quite a lot. And we could barely find it in the white clover stands, you know, last year before the drought. So yeah, I would